And welcome back to another edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. I'm your host, Sean Meyers, joined by a special co-host this week. He was a former guest on the podcast, Rennie Detore, taking time out of his schedule to join us. Rennie, first off, thanks for coming back. I'm glad to get you on once again, and it's particularly important this week, a very hectic week in the schedule, and without Justin Lowry, who's out on paternity leave after the birth of his son Grayson. Glad to have you on here to talk about the one of the busiest weeks of the wrestling calendar with the Royal Rumble and then the days that follow on television.
Yes, thanks for having me back, Sean. I do appreciate it. The Rumble really kind of is when wrestling fans get amped up, for WrestleMania season. And I feel like when you get into the Royal Rumble, and we'll talk more in depth about what actually transpired, but I feel like, that's really when the writing staff and Vince and everybody that works for him really has more direction than they normally do. A lot of times the product is a little disjointed, but I feel like when they get around like the Rumble, they know who they want to win. You've seen in years past that it doesn't matter if that information is common knowledge. They go with the plan that they have. I feel like the direction and what they want to do is better. I just hope, as we get into the WrestleMania part of it, after the Rumble, that they stick with their plan. The writing is concise. They don't spend a lot of time, start drawing these stories now. I don't like when they throw WrestleMania matches together a few weeks ahead of time. But again, the Rumble's a big time for the WWE. It's when things really start to kind of churn in the right direction as far as a creative and direction standpoint.
So when you and I were growing up, the Royal Rumble was a little bit different because there was just one Royal Rumble. There was just one champion. The dynamic has changed over the past 10 to 15 years. There's multiple champions. There's Raw. There's SmackDown. And starting last year, they introduced the Women's Royal Rumble as well. You had mentioned that a lot of times they go with the obvious pick because they know the WrestleMania main events they want to have, and they don't try to get too exotic with how they're going to get there. In your estimation, the fact that there's now 2 Royal Rumbles and potentially 4 different champions to be challenged, does that create more unpredictability and something that you like, or is it just a little bit too much that's going on there, and is it sort of, overkill in a sense, having 2 Royal Rumbles in the same night?
I think I would prefer it like it used to be, and believe me, I'm not going to get into this nostalgia kick by any means, but, to your point, there was a Rumble after starting with 1993. You won the Rumble, you got a shot at the champ. Period. Very simple, very easy to do. I like the simpler approach. I think having a women's Rumble, having a men's Rumble, multiple champions. The only thing I like about it, it does create a little bit of dynamic in terms of, if the winner says, well, I'm going to maybe fight the Raw champion, the SmackDown champion, it does kind of allow you to kind of cross brands a little bit. And, the brand split isn't what it was back in 2002, 2003, when the roster was deep and heavy with stars. But it does create a little bit of, when you see Seth Rollins wants to challenge Brock Lesnar, but maybe Daniel Bryan, it does kind of blur the lines a little bit since they do keep everybody pretty much separate. So that's the one piece of it that I like, is you can cross over to a different brand. I don't think they do an adequate job of stressing how big that is if you're going to have a traditional brand split.
Now, I know you had the opportunity to watch the Royal Rumble. I'm not going to get into the predictions because, first off, I did terribly, which is a good thing. It means that the show wasn't super predictable, at least from top to bottom. Justin and I will revisit that probably next week. But just your overall thoughts on the show. Did it succeed in its purpose, and was it entertaining to you?
Okay, so first part of that, did it succeed in its purpose? I think it did. I think with Becky Lynch winning the Rumble on the women's side, Seth winning it on the men's side, 2 very good, solid choices. You see how they're kind of pairing up a little bit with Becky challenging Ronda Rousey, Seth going up against Lesnar. I like those matchups. They seem fresh to me. They seem like the 2 best singles matches you can put out in WrestleMania with what they have. It was entertaining to a point. I thought the show was ridiculously long. With a kickoff show, I think it ended at like 5 till midnight. You're talking about almost 6 hours of wrestling. I thought a lot of the matches suffered from exhaustion. Styles and Bryan going on after.
Yeah, the fans just had nothing left by the time that match got around, huh?
and sitting and looking at that match and how it played out, it was a very good match. But unfortunately, it will be remembered as, between the Rumble and Lesnar and Balor. So, again, I think the WWE trying to, give you as much incentive with the network, and there's no pay-per-view parameters, I guess, to some point. The show was too long. I thought everything they needed to accomplish, they did. But after a while, it kind of just got to the point where you just wanted it to be over. And that's never a good thing when you're watching, the second biggest show, arguably, of the year.
Let's talk about the men's Royal Rumble. And first off, I will say I thought overall it was a good show, but I thought the show started off better than what it finished. And that seems to be a case a lot of times. To your point, the fans are just exhausted. The viewers at home, even at that point. That being said, everyone's focused on the actual Royal Rumbles themselves. To me, that's always one of the most exciting matches of any time of the year. And you typically get surprises, you get returns, you get debuts. To me, I thought that the Royal Rumble, especially on the men's side, was a little lacking for some excitement. Now, Seth Rollins won. That's the right choice. How he won, I wasn't a huge fan of him being injured, laying ringside for 5 or so minutes. I think the Seth Rollins that I wanted to see win the Royal Rumble, he goes out there even earlier. I think he was like the 10th entrant. I would have been fine with him being maybe even, top 5. Going out there and just wrestling, with his foot on the gas pedal the entire time, showing off that he is, a stamina monster, that he is an Iron Man, that he's the best in-ring guy, as opposed to some dramatic storyline where he's taken out and then has to overcome that injury. Just because I remember Seth Rollins, when he sort of reinvented himself about a year ago at this time, it was because he had about an hour and 5 minutes showing in a gauntlet match on Raw. To me, the way that they booked it, that's how they book every babyface that has to overcome the odds. I would have rather just seen him go out there from start to finish, constantly hitting high impact maneuvers as opposed to how they booked it. And I thought the match was lacking some surprise entrants. Yeah, they had some big NXT guys, Aleister Black, Johnny Gargano. Jeff Jarrett was really the only throwback. But to me, nothing really captured my imagination or my interest, with, I guess, the exception of Nia Jax being in it. Although, actually, I thought that was sort of disappointing that was the last entrant.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said. I think, just touching on Seth Rollins, the problem I have with Rollins, he is the right choice, and he has a connection with the fans. He's clearly a babyface, but he's one of those guys, start, stop, start, stop. I realize the way, you book these days is that, guys get a push to the title, they get brought back to a lesser feud, and they get pushed again. I think Rollins has kind of been a victim of, not really knowing what to do with him all the time. So I agree with your point. I would have booked him to be a little bit stronger in the match. The injury storyline is a case of WWE trying to write too hard, trying to come up with something that they need to tell this story about an injury. Just have the guy go out there. It's okay. We've seen in Rumbles past, going back to '92 with Flair winning the Rumble. Shawn Michaels in '95, guys that start early on, you keep an eye on them. There's always that one guy that lasts the longest, and having him win would have really meant something. It's okay for a guy like that to not to have, have moments where he's in the corner, down, recovering. Like, that's kind of the prototype of how the Rumble was booked, when that one guy that you picked to kind of shine, kind of erupts there at the end. So I agree with you. If you're going to get behind Rollins, I want you to push him, to the moon and back. And I get the dynamic with Lesnar. He's the underdog. He should, much like we saw on Raw, take a beating, have that sense of doubt that he can't do it. But I think Rollins is one of those guys that if you're going to do something with him, now's the time to do it. Enough of this start and stop, intercontinental feud, main event guy.
Keep in mind, he literally just basically lost a feud with Dean Ambrose a month and a half ago. So it's sort of weird to go from that to now being your WrestleMania main event, or at least among the men's matches.
And that's the thing. I get, like I said, Rollins is the best choice. I am intrigued to see him wrestle Lesnar. Now, I realize Lesnar has that prototypical 9-minute match on pay-per-view. I think Rollins can pull more out of him. So I think it's the right choice. It's just where they go between the Rumble and Mania. It'll be interesting to see how they book him. I don't expect him to get the better of Lesnar per se in the next couple of months, but I do expect them to book him strong moving forward. And the other pieces of the Rumble, like the Nia Jax thing, I get it. It was okay. I didn't necessarily enjoy it. It wasn't entertaining. I realized that she can stand toe to toe with certain guys. That's all well and good. China did it, 20 years ago. It's not like it's revolutionary. And I don't think she's the right person. I know people have varying opinions of her. I think she was brought up to the main roster too soon. I don't think she's quite clean enough in the ring for me to feel comfortable. Maybe wrestling guys is an alternative to that. I know she's in the tag team title picture for the women. So, again, it was just okay. The Rumble had Jarrett. That was a nice surprise. There wasn't really anything else that kind of jumped out at me as far as the Rumble match, except the rushing of the entrance. I don't like when they don't time things well, cut something out of the pay-per-view. You can tell every 2 minutes, every minute and a half. This was like every 40 seconds. You don't really get a flavor of like a guy getting in the ring, doing his thing. It's like as soon as that happens, there's another guy coming out. The fans just couldn't, really kind of latch on to the match, and that's another big reason.
How about on the women's side? I think the right person won that one as well with Becky Lynch. That being said, the way that they, sort of had it unfold, logically doesn't make any sense. I mean, why was she in there? Why was she able to take Lana's spot like 3 or 4 minutes after Lana was supposed to enter the ring? Why is Fit Finlay now able to make those decisions? Those things, to me, WWE needs to be better with logic, but I do think the right person won, even though, once again, much like Rollins, I wasn't a huge fan of how it unfolded.
Yeah, I agree. Becky Lynch is the hottest act that they've had, man or woman, in a while. And this is classic WWE booking. She taps out to Asuka. You knew, at least I did anyway, when she did that. I said, there's going to be the person that wins the Rumble. Maybe that people already knew that going in. But again, it's for some reason the WWE is very good at, we know we want to go from point A to point B. It's the middle part to fill in. Sometimes that they don't do all that well. The absence of logic is something that I've gotten used to. So when Fit Finlay's making decisions that he probably shouldn't, it's probably like, well, some people kind of know you kind of run the women's division, other people don't, so why not? So again, it depends on how you look at it. If they got to where they wanted to at the end of the show, that's probably a positive. And saying that, I did enjoy the show too, but how they got there, it's not really been a strong suit for a while now.
The women's title matches, I thought maybe were the two best things throughout the night. Now, I'm not going to say I'm surprised by either, because when you just look on paper, they should have been great matches. But I think it says something that this company now, especially with all the rumors of men who are not happy with their position, so on and so forth, and we'll get into some of that. I think right now you could say the best and strongest part of WWE that separates it and proves that it is the number one brand still is the women. Because you look at Ronda and Sasha and then Becky and Asuka that you alluded to, maybe your two best matches so far of 2019 came with those two women's title matches.
Well, think of it this way, Sean. When you have Becky Lynch in a match, it kind of is reminiscent of Daniel Bryan when he was really hot as a babyface. Now, granted, Becky Lynch didn't get to be a babyface in a traditional way, but she kind of had that Stone Cold Steve Austin. She's trying to be pushed as a heel, and the fans take to her, and you don't have any choice but to kind of book her, leave her alone. The personality, the character doesn't change, but she's still being cheered. So when you look at the two women's matches, you can argue that you have your two of the more over acts in the company with Becky Lynch and Rousey, good or bad. Now, I know Raw was a little bit different flavor for her, and we'll get into more of that, I'm sure. But, Rousey has proved that in the ring, she can go. She's entertaining to watch. When she's on a pay-per-view match, I enjoy watching her work because she's very fluid. She's a lot like Lesnar. She's like a natural athlete that took to this very easily. Angle's another one. You can just see the work that she's put in, and she gets it. So you got Rousey, you got Lynch. Those two really pulled a lot out of those two matches based on the fact that they're probably arguably the two most over people that are in the company. I thought Asuka had a good showing. I think they're kind of trying to rebuild her a little bit, although she was absent on SmackDown, which I didn't understand after a big win. And of course, Sasha can carry her own in with anybody. So again, you just look at the dynamic of who's in the match, how they were laid out. They were booked really well. So I agree with you.
Sasha, I thought that was the most motivated I've seen her in a long time, and a lot of people, just because of how she's been presented, they don't think of her as maybe being amongst the best. I think I could make an argument that she is as good as any woman or better than any woman in WWE. That being said, right now, obviously, it's all about Becky Lynch, and you can't argue that. But Sasha's so good that people, I think, have forgotten that, and she looks so motivated in that match. Now, the question is, I always see something like that, and WWE doesn't seem to capitalize on it. I think Sasha's going to go right back to being in a tag team with Bayley. They're going to try to win the women's championship in about a month, and that seems almost like a disservice to her. I know, yeah, you get to be the first. She's still, after that performance, I think bigger and better things for her as opposed to just, being in a tag team that, truthfully, while the tag team titles are a cool idea, it's not, something that's real significant in my mind.
Yeah, I think the women's tag teams titles are unnecessary. I'm all for putting the women on the main event on a pay-per-view, on a Raw. They've earned it. They deserve it. They're great athletes. They deserve as much TV time as any man in the company. Adding another set of titles, we kind of talked about this early on, like in terms of how the Rumble's laid out with lots of different titles and who's going to do what. And it can be good to a point, but I think it's just diluting the championship part. And I think, adding women's tag team titles, they have the roster for it, but I'm afraid it's just going to be another reason to have titles or to put something on a letterhead that says we're introducing women's titles. So again,
and the unanswered part of the question is it going to be between brands?
You really don't know because you have tag titles on both brands for the men. So possibly, or do you go by which team wins it? I think because of how the roster is, you're going to have to do it between both brands. But then again, there's that logic piece that's so pesky about,
right.
Okay, well, there's two sets of tag team champs for the men, but we got women's tag team champs, but they float between both brands. To get to your point real quick about Sasha, I agree with you. I think she's underutilized, but I think she's also miscast. Better heel, has no business being a babyface. Her character was designed in NXT. It thrived as a heel. They tiptoe around that stuff with that awful Bayley storyline, which went nowhere. Have her be a full-fledged heel. If Lynch is a hot act as a babyface, Rousey kind of just, sooner or later the crowd's going to turn on her completely if and when before she leaves. But I think Sasha's a natural heel, and that's where she needs to go with it.
Anything else noteworthy in your estimation from the Royal Rumble? Good showing for Finn. I think it's a similar situation to Sasha. He probably won't stick around in the main event for the time being, but hopefully he doesn't drop too far. And I was honestly highly entertained by the tag team match with Shane and The Miz.
Yeah.
Not a big fan of them winning, but I was entertained. And then the Cruiserweight, I don't know if you caught that on the pre-show, just terrific. So, I mean, there was a lot to like from the Royal Rumble.
There was. Just be more selective with how you lay the show out. I think the Rumble is still on, actually, right now as we talk. But, the Finn stuff, we've seen the Lesnar matches before. It's nice to see Brock sell for him. It gives him a little bit of air of legitimacy, much like he did for Joe when they feuded. I think Balor's the kind of guy, and this is where I go with it if I'm booking. So I'll play Booker for a few seconds. Balor should be the first challenger for Rollins after Mania. And what they need to kind of create is, I know that they moved Balor in a feud with Lashley for the IC title. I think you got to do something with Balor scoring some sort of victory over Rollins. I don't know how you do it, but you got to. I miss the days, Sean, where a guy was vying for the title, meaning Rollins, and he either was champ and lost a non-title match to somebody like Balor, or Balor owns a victory over him that they can go back and say, hey, by the way, didn't Balor injure Rollins, or I'm sorry, Balor got hurt in that match with Rollins,
yes,
as Universal Champ. There's a built-in story there, so let's not forget about Balor being inserted, hopefully if Rollins takes the title from Lesnar. That's a ready-made feud, has a lot of upside to it. We've seen it before, but not quite in this way.
So let's focus on post Royal Rumble stuff, I think that there was a pretty significant story that came out this week, and really there's two, but one's the headliner. It involves Dean Ambrose, and I think if you poll wrestling fans right now, it's almost 50-50. Is this legitimate? Is this part of a storyline? I can tell you that some people within the company don't even know at this point because, of course, WWE, if they are doing a storyline like this, they want to keep it tight-lipped. I understand that. Reports came out that after Raw, Dean Ambrose basically let the company know, or maybe he even let them know before Raw, but the reports came out after Monday that he will not be renewing his contract. Now, the interesting thing is his contract's not up yet. It's up around WrestleMania time. So that leads to a couple questions. One, why would WWE put this out there knowing that there's still months left in this guy's contract? Additionally, do you continue to use him knowing that he might not be resigning? Or is this something part of a ploy that could lead to a WrestleMania match involving Triple H?
Yeah, I kind of feel like I'm in front of it like the second essay question. I don't know which part to start with, but I think, so a couple things. Typically when you see stuff like this, I mean, it's a lot more open of a business now. They do say, I'm wishing this person well, I released them. It's odd for them to be out in front of it this far with letting them know, or letting the fans know that he's leaving in a couple months.
Because it could always change between now and then, right?
Right, and I'll give you an example. Like Daniel Bryan was negotiating his contract last year. There was talk of him maybe going to New Japan, kind of seeing where he could go if he doesn't re-sign. That was a lot of that talk happened without WWE actually acknowledging it. Much like there's been some talk about AJ Styles. He hasn't renewed a new deal yet. He lost to Daniel Bryan. But they're not coming out and saying anything because it's kind of like, well, he's still negotiating. Now, if Ambrose went to them and said, I'm done, based on reports that are saying he's unhappy with his character, it makes sense, honestly, Sean, but I'm a little leery about why it was out, they're so far out in front of it. I feel like if I'm taking a good educated guess, that they're assuming that he's leaving based on what he's been saying, but they're going to work hard to try to make something out of this between then and now and maybe flip it on us and say he's staying and we're going to kind of turn this into a work. That's my opinion. I think they're saying it in the hopes that they can convince him, like, look, we put this out here. Let's try to make this into a storyline. We'll give you something that has some teeth to it. And if he does end up leaving, they can say, well, yeah, we told you he was leaving a few months ago. So that's my take on it. I think he legitimately did say he wanted to go, but I think they're going to try to work hard to make him happy and start with, hey, let's work the fans and say, we already said you were leaving. Let's turn it into something you can really, really run with. Maybe sign him for another year. So that's where I'm at with it.
Do you like the fact that it leads to so much speculation that fans are really going to be falling to see what happens? Because this is something that WWE can capitalize on if they continue to use him. I mean, they could theoretically just pull him off of TV from here on out, but I don't think that would be capitalizing on the buzz that this has created.
Sure. I mean, and again, this is nothing new for wrestling. It's not uncharted territory. You go back all the way to Hall and Nash leaving, working a pay-per-view, working house shows. People knew they were leaving. The WWE even acknowledged in those matches against Shawn Michaels for Nash, and I believe Scott Hall wrestled Vader at the pay-per-view, their last show. It was acknowledged on the show, like, these guys are possibly leaving the company. So it's not like it's never happened, but if I'm WWE, I'd be very careful about broadcasting this out because there's already enough groundswell of this, all elite wrestling coming out, like you're putting that together. I would be careful how much attention I would draw to the free agents that maybe want to get out of here. So
exactly, and that's sort of why in years past promoters don't go out of their way to acknowledge that because, oh, well, he's leaving. I got to find out where he's going, and
sure.
Let's sort of stay on that topic because over the past 3 weeks, each time I've done this podcast, a couple weeks ago I said the Revival and Mike Kanellis and Maria reportedly asked for their release. They did not get it. They've continued to work on television.
Right.
Last week, Ronda Rousey, it was reported, could be finishing up. Now, that has nothing to do with her wanting to leave for another company, but it's a big news story nonetheless. This week, Dean Ambrose, and then the following night, Hideo Itami wrestled on 205 Live. He received his release right afterwards, I believe, and I don't know that WWE's confirmed that, but it looks like that is almost a guarantee that that will happen. And he's not a guy that's anywhere close to a headliner, but it seems like a trend. What do you make of this? What's the next 3 to 6 months going to hold? Because All Elite Wrestling, by all indications, will begin at the end of May with their first show. Who knows when they go to consistent programming? But already, a couple of weeks into 2019, it looks like it's affecting the WWE's roster.
Yeah, but isn't that the fun part of the business that's been missing to some degree? I mean, for those people who are fans or were fans in the late 90s when you guys were jockeying, moving different places, it creates a very good dynamic for the business. And I realize that WWE, much to your point, Revival, Mike and Maria, like those, they asked for their release. WWE's like, no, we're not going to do it. We're going to try to do something with you, things like that. I think I just like the way, with these people asking for the release, it's good for wrestling fans because you're seeing that there's another alternative that they could potentially go and work and be utilized potentially to their fullest. I mean, I like it. I don't know where this AEW thing is going to go. There's a lot of stuff still left to figure out. I mean, I like the talent that they put together so far. They got a lot of work to do, but the idea that even the smallest sniff of a new company coming out has already started the ball rolling downhill for talent in the WWE that feels like they're not being used properly, to already be saying, I want my release. Ask yourself this question. Would they have asked that same thing a year ago before AEW was around? Probably not.
Well, here's a follow-up to that.
Yeah.
Would this type of reaction, and especially if it's legitimate with Ambrose, because that is a big name, he was a former world champion, would that type of reaction create Vince McMahon changing his approach? Because I think we can agree Triple H and maybe Stephanie to some extent, they know what they're doing in terms of connecting with the fan base in 2019. Vince McMahon still seems very set in his ways. With all this displeasure from the wrestlers and potential for them to go to a direct competitor, is that going to have to change how WWE does business?
I mean, I think it's going to have to. I think at this point, the WWE, for quite a while, has had the luxury of just picking and choosing who they want. And, if you go to Ring of Honor and you go to, Evolve, like different companies in the indies, like they're just kind of picking and choosing. They're having a great time. Like, I want this guy, I want this guy, I want this person. Now, and I feel like, I don't know where AEW is going to go, as I mentioned, like they have a legitimate backer. And I think that's the part, if I'm Vince McMahon and I'm Triple H and I'm Stephanie or whoever, whatever part of that three-headed monster is paying attention to competition. Vince has said that, he doesn't compete with WCW, he doesn't compete with TNA, he doesn't compete with AEW, he competes with Disney and Hasbro and HBO or whatever he thinks he is or whatever he thinks he's selling that isn't wrestling. But, AEW is going to be a legitimate contender in this discussion. So he's got to start thinking about, one, you're not going to have free reign of picking any talent that you want. There is somebody else on the table that's, going to be in the States that's going to say, I have the resources to go out and get the guys that I want. And as soon as you have somebody on your roster that's due up, and it's already was broke earlier about Lesnar when he's done after WrestleMania, Heyman's come out, whether he's doing this just to kind of sell this whole dynamic is, look, I'm shopping Lesnar around and AEW's on the table. So again, if I'm Vince, if I'm Stephanie, if I'm Triple H, I don't take them lightly, but I have a feeling that that's where their head is at right now as well. We're not worried so much to a point about what they're doing, but they really should be, just based on a couple other factors like the finances, who's backing them. The guy who's at Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, he's got money for sure.
McMahon. He's got more money than McMahon, and McMahon's dumping a ton into the XFL. So, is McMahon even going to be paying attention to his product? So there's a lot of different things you can think about, but I like, if Vince is smart, he'll pay attention, and that will have a trickle-down effect, and he won't continue to be ignorant in 2019 that he's the show and he's untouchable, because I don't think that to be the case, at least not as this year, kind of progresses.
want to, in about 5 minutes or so, touch on other things from Raw and SmackDown. And again, we mentioned it is a busy week, so unfortunately, just because of all the things that we've had to discuss, we're not going to be able to give a full complement of time on each of these topics. But I thought there was a lot of significant things that took place on Monday Night Raw. The one that most people are talking about, in addition to the Dean Ambrose news, is the Becky Lynch Ronda Rousey showdown, and I think you saw the best and worst in a 24-hour span of Ronda Rousey. I know you already kind of highlighted her and her ability in the ring. That being said, she really struggled on Monday on the mic initially before Bayley came out, and then she had the match. It was an okay match, good enough. And then when Becky came out, it seemed like Ronda hit another gear and she got into like psycho mode, which is what they probably want her to be. And Becky's reaction, just smiling, smirking in the face, that's exactly what you want Becky Lynch to be, I think, at this point. Everyone wants to see that match at WrestleMania. Your reaction to what that might create over the next couple of months and how Ronda sort of came off on Raw?
Well, as far as Ronda on Raw, I think, you said you got the best and worst for in a 24-hour span. I think it happened in about like a 24-second span. She came out, and I don't know if you caught the line that they gave her, and obviously it was written for her. It was the most ridiculous, scripted, like, if you don't even try, like, how do you know you'll succeed? Like, it was some ridiculous hyperbole about, trying to hit, goals or whatever it was. It was awful. The crowd booed her incessantly, and with good reason. She's terrible when they script stuff for her. You saw after Becky Lynch came out, got the better of her. Rousey tripped up on her words. They sent Bayley out early. Rousey went into being herself with Becky Lynch there, and you saw like that promo felt real to me. Like it's like that's what she would say if she was standing like across from somebody else and Dana White was trying to break them up. That's how that felt to me. When she gets overly scripted, it's like anything else. I mean, it's like the ringmaster or something that they've tried to put together. Like, let her be herself. Give her some generic outline to go by. Stop writing this terrible dialogue for her, especially against someone like Lynch, who is so red hot in terms of her character that Rousey's got to be on her game on the mic, and they just have to let her go out and be herself. Play off of what Lynch is saying, which is what happened in the latter portion of that segment. So, again, just be smart about it. Don't over-script her, and teach her or give her some pointers. Like, just go with what the person across from you is saying. Let that be your guide as opposed to, reading from a self-help book.
I still have doubts that it's going to be a one-on-one match. I think that there's an outside chance Charlotte could get involved, and of course Charlotte and Becky are starting another storyline on SmackDown. We'll see what that leads to. We'll probably know within the next couple of weeks if that's a possibility that Charlotte would be in it. I think it's a mistake. The one thing that there really wasn't any doubt in my mind was Seth Rollins would be challenging Brock Lesnar. They played that up on Monday. They had Lesnar beat him down. Lesnar's probably not going to be around on a regular basis between now and then. And then, of course, Seth is going to have to bide his time, I would guess, for the next month. But are you sort of sold on this feud for WrestleMania? Did they do enough?
I think so. I think Brock Lesnar is, for all his faults, and I think fans are starting to grow a little bit tired of him in terms of, he really doesn't do anything different or has for years. It's the same story over and over again that, Brock is a beast. He's the man to beat. It's impossible for a guy of lesser stature to go out there and win, except for maybe their feud that Joe had with Lesnar. They kind of stood toe-to-toe with each other a little bit. So, they did enough to sell me on it because I've really never seen that match. So that's always a good thing, if it's something new. So, I thought that was the logical way to go about it. I like the idea of Rollins, again, being inserted in that same role that others have been, that, you can't win. It's an age-old storyline. It works. Again, sometimes the simplest path is the best. I hope they just stick with one clear-cut way to get from there to Mania. Please don't throw in anything. I don't want to guess referee. I don't want another person. I don't want him in any Shark Tank. I don't want anything that's going to get muddy the water. Look, Lesnar's been for this many days. He's unbeatable. He's mowed through whoever you want to list. That's the way this should be. Heyman telling Rollins, what makes you think you're any different than this person, and this person? Explain to me what you think you can do. Put that doubt in the fans' mind. And I even come across maybe with Rollins, like, maybe he starts to doubt himself a little bit. But don't get too cute with it, please. I just have the match and have the right guy win.
The right guy has not been winning a lot of matches in the form of Elias. He became a face about 3 months ago. He was getting huge reactions as a heel. He got huge reactions as a face. But he's not had a consistent feud. He's not had a lot of success in terms of wins and losses and meaningful matches. So has sort of a weird exchange with Jeff Jarrett at the Royal Rumble. And I said, that's sort of, he kind of came across as a heel there. Well, the next night we figured out why. He is now back to being a heel. And I don't like when they turn guys so quickly, because it sort of, everyone just starts thinking, well, it's like the Big Show. The Big Show changes every other week. How can you really grow attached? I thought Braun Strowman really got hurt by a quick heel turn back to face. With Elias, it seems more natural, and it seems like he enjoys this role better. The fans secretly probably enjoy him better as a heel. It's a good move as long as he gets a consistent feud and gets consistently elevated as a result.
Yeah, I agree. I think, that's been kind of the MO of the WWE in recent years. And Rollins is a perfect example, Sean. He's a good guy, then they turn him bad. He's with Triple H, the Authority. He gets hurt, he comes back, they cheer him. It's natural, they missed him, and he turns on the thing. So just pick a direction and go with it. Elias is a unique character, a unique talent in the sense that, his in-ring work is getting better every week. I think he has that Rock syndrome in the sense that, as a heel, he's going to get cheered. Elias as a heel is going to get cheered. It doesn't change the fact that you can still pair him up with guys that are considered baby faces.
Right.
But, what he does week to week is not indicative of labeling him a certain way other than just how you book him. The Rock was the same way. He was a heel, he got cheered out of the building, but he still fought guys like Ken Shamrock and Owen Hart when they were good. Let him do what he does well, connecting with the fans. They'll determine what they want to do with him as far as, cheer, boo. But as far as how you're booking him out, just pick a direction and go with it, and stop starting and stopping with him, because, again, he's going to be like just another guy that they don't really feel like, when you watch him, they don't know really what to do with him. And that's unfortunate, because he's, again, one of the guys that's super over on the roster. So it's shocking to me. Nothing against the feud with Jarrett, if that's what they're going to do. But I feel like he deserves a little bit more than a nostalgia act. I don't, unless they feel like just the notoriety of working with a Hall of Famer is going to elevate him, maybe, or it could come across as we don't have anything for you to do.
That seems more like it, yeah.
Jarrett sings, I'm serious, this is probably what happened. Well, you sing and Jarrett sings, so why not have you guys feud? Like that, it could be that simple and that stupid.
Right.
So, again, Elias is one of those guys that, because he's so connected with the fans so quickly, he can go through a couple transitions where they're kind of like start, stop. But at some point, the fans are going to start to, it's going to take some time, but they'll start not to care about him. You don't want to have that happen.
Did you happen to catch Daniel Bryan's unveiling of the new title on SmackDown?
I did.
So this is an example, and in 2019, you don't always get this, a guy that has fully bought in to a character. He's adopted every real aspect to the character, and I think that's refreshing. Now, some people might say it's, over the top, it's already sort of annoying, and where does he go from here? But to me, that's what you want, especially a heel, to do, is really buy in to the character, and he unveils this completely different looking title. It's made of, I think, hemp and wood and whatever else, because that's what, the character he has right now. It doesn't seem as forced and as fake with him as it does some other times when they try to make a person into a character all of a sudden. Daniel Bryan's doing a really good job playing off of this and getting the most out of this run.
And, I don't know Daniel Bryan personally, but I'm sure if I'm someone like him, being so wildly popular, I know some will look at this and say, boy, they really failed miserably on his return from a major injury. Never really did anything with them. I think the timing of that, like, I do agree with that sentiment. I think the timing of it with him contracts and his negotiation didn't really coincide all that well. So I'm sure he's probably feeling like this is kind of refreshing. I'm not doing the yes thing anymore. I'm trying to sink my teeth into something else that's a little bit different than, just continuing to play that same guy. And I'm good with it. I love Daniel Bryan. I think he's a tremendous talent. I like to see the WWE always scares me with stuff like this, Sean, because I get the character, I dig what he's doing, but I don't want that to overextend beyond what he does when it comes time to wrestle. I don't want the gimmick to supersede when he gets into the ring and has a quality opponent, letting him still do the moveset and still be aggressive.
Right, and you're familiar with Nikki Cross. I've made the point to Justin. Her character almost like makes it hard for her to wrestle a traditional match. She has to do like the craziness and everything. Sometimes that's really hard for a performer to mesh the character with their style of wrestling. I think Daniel Bryan should be able to handle it, but I get your concern in that regard as well.
Yeah, you just don't want the gimmick to overtake his ring work. I don't like when they roll out a gimmick and it's like, well, you're a certain character, so you can't do drop kicks anymore. You can't do flying headbutts. You have a wood title now, so you have to be that heel that ducks out all. Like some of that stuff can play into what he's doing now, but please don't change his overall what he does well as an athlete.
I think that we covered a lot of the big things this week, but again, we mentioned Royal Rumble, and then you have big Raw and SmackDown episodes. A lot of good, also a lot of big news with superstars being unhappy. How do you really evaluate? We'll go pretty much all of 2019, the first month of the year to this point, with the wrestling industry as a whole.
Well, I think if you're a fan and you're obviously not happy with the WWE's product, I think you have a sense of optimism. I have friends who are wrestling fans that have been latched on to New Japan for months, watching their shows, paying attention to what they're doing, Ring of Honor. But I think the whole inclusion of AEW and how that's going to kind of play off in the next couple months. I think it's a time as a fan to be excited about a change or like some sort of alternative that's not I have to go to download the streaming service for New Japan, which is fine. But this is a real living, breathing entity that's going to have some legs under it. I think that's going to be exciting to watch. I also, and we talked about this, I'm excited to see how the WWE responds to it. If they ignore it or if they're coming at it saying, we got to really be on our toes. And I think it makes everybody better. It's an old cliche in wrestling, competition makes you better. Well, not just wrestling, in anything. I think that's, not to go past WrestleMania season, but I'll be interested to see how that dynamic plays out because there's been no real viable challenger to the WWE at this point. As far as the WWE as a whole, again, the Rumble was an entertaining show to a point. There's still, for me, there's far too many people on the roster that they really don't know what to do with, and even the ones where you feel like they have a little bit of direction, the storytelling's got to be a little bit crisper and not so, convoluted most of the time. So I'm optimistic that the matches they're laying out for WrestleMania are going to be good. There's nobody really, like big surprises or big names coming back, at least that we've heard of. So they don't have that to rely on anymore to sell the show. They've kind of went through their Goldbergs, their Stings. That ship has sailed. I don't think Cena really carries the kind of weight as far as, coming back for WrestleMania yet.
Right.
I'll be interested to see how they tell their stories from now until Mania and see if they can start, building some momentum that they're going to need come spring and summer with a new company to deal with.
Rennie, I appreciate it as always. I know we got up to a little bit of a rocky start tonight with some issues, but we got through it, and that's good enough. Definitely we'll have you back again in the future. I appreciate you filling in for Justin Lowry this week.
Thanks, Sean. I had a great time. Anytime.
All right, that is Rennie Detore, my co-host tonight. Once again, this is Sean Meyers. You can check us out on Twitter. 5-Star Pod Wrestle is the handle. Also go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, like the videos, check out all the videos dating back almost a year now. We started right before WrestleMania last year. But for this episode, that is all. So we'll see you again next week on the 5 Star Podcast of Wrestling.